What's up everybody, Coach Mills here coming at you with a brand new guide where you're gonna learn one of the most oppressive champions in the entire game right now. Now the champion I'm referring to is none other than the sharpshooter herself, CAITLYN. I mean, her crazy range allows her to harass consistently and outperform almost anyone on her own. Sometimes you can even 2v1 consistently. That's how dominant this champion is if you learn to master her. Now in general, this champion is going to be a really great choice if you want to exert high pressure in the early game while scaling incredibly hard at the same time. But the thing is, even though that CAITLYN is very pretty much overpowered in some aspects, it can be incredibly easy to mess her up if you don't do the exact right thing, and it can be really difficult to regain control. But in this video, we're going to be breaking down all the common things that you need to avoid and then lay out some amazing tips in 3 stages of the game, from early, mid, and late game. So you're ready to dominate on this incredible champion right now and climb the ranked ladder with ease. But of course, GameLeap.com is your one-stop shop in order to improve your CAITLYN skills even further. We got in-depth VOD reviews and challenger advanced guides, so do yourself a favor and go check it out in the links down below with our brand new 50% off sale. Don't miss out on this insane opportunity to become broken, and I can't wait to see you there. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Now, the first big mistake that people do over and over again on CAITLYN is they overuse their Q, and it's one of the simplest mistakes, but it is an incredibly common one. Every single time you use it incorrectly, it will not only just waste your mana, but it can also completely destroy the position of your wave in the lane. You see, what you need to understand is that Kate's Q pushes very quickly, and there is only a few occasions where you want to use it at all. You could use it to pick up CS that is simply too far out of range, combo it together with your E or W to guarantee its landing, or very carefully, and I can't stress this enough, very precisely, hitting an enemy champion only if they are the first thing being hit. You see, CAITLYN's Q damage drops dramatically after the first target hit, so it's never worth it to throw it through minions and at an enemy unless you meet the other 2 criteria first and foremost. Now, the next mistake that we gotta talk about is using traps before actually fighting. This one is very tough to realize at first, but when I explain it to you, it will make a ton of sense, so let's break it down right now. You see, CAITLYN's traps are really a unique tool. They can control small areas and threaten to kill someone on their own, just by themselves. What they can't do, however, is stop someone from fighting. CAITLYN's traps have the little arming time, and that really kills her potential of holding people in place without planning ahead of time at all. While using traps, you have to make a choice. You can't place them on top of someone, so you have to predict where they're going to move, and you can't cut them off by placing traps on their escape route or expect them to move in and keep yourself or an ally safe. It's just not gonna work. Placing a singular trap on top of someone or really close to someone is not effective at all. Use multiple traps to make enemies second guess their movements, halt their advance, stop them from escaping, or who knows, maybe all 3 at the exact same time in succession. Now, the only time you can place a trap on top of someone is when they're already CC'd in Zonus or reviving from Guardian Angel. As long as you do it under these circumstances, you're gonna have a lot better time using your traps and you're gonna get more value on average. Now, the third and final mistake that is happening a lot, and you need to stop doing it right now, is stop casting CAITLYN's Q late game. Please don't do this to yourself because it's just not going to work out how you want it to. CAITLYN builds crit and scales with energized effects like crazy. Yes, your Q is pretty strong, but only use it to hit people who are out of your range after you hit them on a trap or in an EQ combo. It is way more effective to continuously auto attack on CAITLYN because of the items that you can build. If CAITLYN brought lethality for some reason, then sure, that's fine, you could do that, but it would be different. But she doesn't, so please don't make this mistake. This is the mistake that you gotta stop right away. Now that we've finished talking about some of the biggest mistakes on CAITLYN that could really be holding you back, let's break down each game phase now individually so that you know exactly what you need to do through every step of the game, just like a challenger level player. Now, the first thing for the first stage, we're going to be talking about laning, and you really need to abuse your range. She's a sniper, for God's sake. Come on, stop playing so damn close. You see, CAITLYN's early game is all about heavy aggression. You should not be playing passively, however. Just because you're at range doesn't mean you should be playing passively. You see, if you play passively, it's gonna literally let the enemy get by for free without any punish, and they're gonna be extremely fed and start dominating the entire game because you're not keeping them in check. If any person gets into your range, auto attack them just to zone them away from CS. Make them use up all their sustain so they have to go back to spawn or they have to play incredibly passively and control every single piece of the early game as best you possibly can. It is one of your strongest points with this champion, so make sure you abuse this a lot in the early game, and this is one of the big places where a lot of people mess up and it snowballs throughout the entire course of the game because they don't keep the enemy laner in check. Now, another thing is, don't be afraid to hit the enemy support. The enemy ADC isn't the only person you could poke. You can ruin the enemy's ADC's life and the support at the exact same time. Now sure, managing both of your enemies will be harder, but if you aren't doing it, you aren't playing CAITLYN to her highest potential. Take what we mentioned about your Q and W and make your enemies take damage as much as possible while you stay out of their range. Now the next part of laning, the last part of laning we gotta talk about is recognize when enough is enough. Yes, you should be playing up onto your enemies, but you need to keep your eyes open for roams and ganks. You can handle most things, but a 3v2 particularly early is a completely different story. You're just gonna get destroyed, of course, and there's nothing you could do about it unless you play in a way that prepares for it. Getting ganked or roamed on doesn't completely kill your lead or your control over the lane, however, but it still can really hurt you later on and mess up your snowball. If the enemy is trying their hardest to break your grasp over bot lane, then switch up your tactics and attempt to freeze the wave rather than pressuring towers and health bars during that time, and that will be a lot better than, of course, dying and, like we said, allowing the enemy to gain a big advantage over you and your team. Now moving on to the next section that we gotta talk about is the mid game. And what you need to do in the mid game is get every CS you possibly can. CAITLYN is a particular resource and item dependent ADC. You have to make sure that you aren't ignoring sections of the map with safe farm. Part of getting that godly 10 CS per minute is making sure that you are actually in the right places for the farm, right place at the right time, and the other half is making sure that you don't miss the ones that are just on your screen right in front of you. The next thing you need to think about in the mid game is don't be afraid to use your R to chunk out enemies before fights. CAITLYN R actually hits quite hard, and in the mid game certain enemies might not have sustain at all. You can make it much harder for mages, supports, or even other ADCs to stick around for stuff like dragon or an incoming tower push. This can keep the enemies off you or heavily increase the chance of them dying in the fight to come, so this is an incredibly important thing that you need to keep in mind. Now last up, we're going to talk about the late game where all your play comes to fruition, but it's really easy to mess up the late game, so let's make sure that we iron out the big mistakes and give you some tips. The first thing that you need to think about or remember is that your traps equal death by this point almost 100% of the time. In the late game, if a squishy champion steps on a trap, they should no longer exist. Easy Doomblade because CAITLYN can deal over thousands of damage in a single hit with the right build, and make sure that you are placing your traps well to cut off important areas because these can land you some really crazy kills and damage, so this is one of the most important aspects about the late game. Now that being said, however, you don't want to use all 5 traps at once. You try to cut off a whole part of river, people can walk between that, so you got to be really careful. But if instead you control some smaller areas or just place some while staving a few for the fight that will break out, you will greatly increase the damage you are putting out and make the enemy really consider how they're approaching each and every team fight. Now, the second thing you need to think about the late game is you have to be bullying other ADCs. CAITLYN is really good at punishing all ADCs in the late game, especially someone like Kasa who has very short range because you could just outrange her and still deal tons of damage. Because of your high range and rapid fire auto cannon to add even more range on top, you can usually stack up some autos on minions to ready a headshot and unleash on whoever poor squishy decides to try to clear a minion wave or defend a tower. This on its own can half enemy health without any bonus damage from a trap. You won't always be able to get that sweet trap headshot off, but you can definitely get those big poke auto offs. Be careful though, if you do this too often, you might become predictable and get caught out of position. Now, with all that said, now that you got the basics and fundamentals down, let's wrap up with the runes and items to give you the full build for CAITLYN. As far as runes go, you want to take Fleet Work unless you don't need the sustain. In that case, you should opt for Lethal Temple instead, so you have really crazy DPS. From there, you should take Overheal if you have a healing support, otherwise Presence of Mind is usually better. For the Legend rune, Bloodline is the best choice hands down. CAITLYN has really high damage attacks that come out fairly often. So that being said, the Life Seal will usually end up saving you or sustaining you. Now last in precision, cut down. CAITLYN has one of the lowest base health in the game, allowing you to abuse the cut down plus cold strategy early while also upping your late game damage against basically any other class of champions, because let's face it, most people have a lot of health in their build. Now moving on to some secondary runes, going sorcery for Nimbus Cloak and Gathering Storm is a pretty obvious choice. The movement speed can help you be safe or can be used to snag a kill, while the large amounts of bonus AD allow you to scale even better into the late game. There are other trees that have good one-off runes for CAITLYN, but sorcery just offers these two really good choices that are hard to pass up. Don't forget to outfit your mirror rune with attack speed, adaptive, and armor, and for summoner spells, flash and heal are the staple sums that will serve you well in your games. Now next up, we gotta talk about the items where things can get a little bit cut and dry for CAITLYN. Right now, getting double damage items before attack speed items is better for raw damage, but CAITLYN scales uniquely with crit with energized items. You are definitely looking to buy Infinity Edge as your first major completed item, followed by your Berserker Greaves. At that point, the Rapid Fire Canyon makes for a standard third item choice, giving you those big range, big crit shots, but afterwards, things are gonna be up for speculation by you and depending on the game. There are tons of different options. Do you need more armor penetration, anti-healing, extra survivability? There are so many different things. Essence Reaver, Bloodthirster, or Mortar Reminder. There's a list that goes on, and I'm not gonna tell you that one size fits all. We gave you some of the best things that you could be using, but of course, your own personal preference and the game state is definitely gonna dictate exactly which of these you want, depending on the situation. Also, matchups could heavily dictate these things, so I'm not gonna say that one is by far the best, but I gave you some guidelines here, and it's important to understand that you need to be adaptable if you truly want to master this prestigious champion. Now that being said, if you want to know more and master this champion with step-by-step instruction, GameLeap.com is the one-stop shop for in-depth challenger tier VOD reviews where you can see this champion in action, playing games by a high-level player and watch their decision-making so that you can learn and incorporate that into your game with ease. And right now, our 50% off sale is in the links down below. Do yourself a favor and don't miss out on this insane opportunity, but thanks so much for coming by. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.